Welcome, 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 good thinkers from around the world. We are back trying to recover from last week when we were going to be delving into Dunbar's number and how that relates to how we should think about or how we can think about our friendship versus our social network versus maybe more of our transactional network, and what Dunbar's number helps us think about so that we can make sure that we are managing these networks, managing these relationships in the optimal way or the most interesting way, or with mindfulness or thinking about it instead of just reacting to it. So we started to do that last week. We had all these good thinkers coming on the show, and all of a sudden my internet went down. So I thought, oh, okay, well, we'll reboot the internet and try to get right back on. No dice, didn't work. Then we took a look down the street and we saw that Comcast, the internet company, was out there working on some things. So this was a problem bigger than what we could handle in the confines of our own router. So welcome back. I hope that you rejoin. Welcome seasoned good thinkers, and welcome new good thinkers and seasoned good thinkers, regular good thinkers, members of the Good Thinking family. Welcome new good thinkers onto the show by letting us know who you are and where you're from. So that's the fun, who you are and where you're from. And we need the names anyway, because I've got to borrow some names for today's show. So we'll pull your comments in, so definitely participate. There will be, as always, or as usual, sometimes I forget, rubber chickens for participation. Big deal to earn some rubber chickens. So let us know who you are and where you're from. We have our first good thinker on. Okay. So Stephen says, greetings from the city known for fetishizing its airport carpets. That's so true. So in the Portland International Airport, there are these carpets. There are always these funky carpets, and it became like a thing to take your picture of your feet with the carpet before or after you go on a trip. So that becomes like a thing. And then when they replaced the carpet with a new carpet, they started selling little pieces of the carpet. Crazy. So the carpet became like a symbol or brand of the airport. So when you think of yourself, you think of yourself and you think, okay, brand, what does it mean to brand yourself? Well, that's how the airport kind of branded itself in a really unusual way. All right, welcome. We've got some good thinkers coming on. We've got Jawad. Hello, Jawad. Welcome, welcome. And we have got Balewa, Carol from Johannesburg. Yay, Johannesburg. And Jawad rather, is from, I know I can remember, from Morocco. And we have Paria from Munich. So we've got a lot of good thinkers coming. And the cool thing about it is that everyone is coming from around the world. We've got Parveen from Mumbai, India. Fantastic. Welcome, good thinkers. We need a lot of participation today because we're going to be talking about social networks and Dunbar's number, and how we can think about Dunbar's number in a way that might enrich and enhance not just our business life, but also our personal lives and our lives, because, business is just one aspect, right? All right, so welcome, good thinkers. I'm going to take this little banner. We have got greetings from London. Shrijo from London, welcome. And we have got Derek from Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. Woohoo! So we've got, again, good thinkers from all over the world. I'm going to take this banner off. Let us know who you are and where you're from as we get started. Okay, so here we go. First question. How much time do you spend grooming your network? So obviously, if you're on LinkedIn, watching us from LinkedIn live here, you're on LinkedIn, you're on a network. Those of you who are watching from YouTube live, from my YouTube channel, Becky Saltzman, might be different, but most of us are in some way involved in our network. How much time do you spend grooming your network? So really think about it. And that would include liking, commenting, posting, thinking about the number of likes, comments that we get, caring about the number of likes and comments we get, and caring about the number of followers we have. So just those thoughts in your mind about how much time do you spend on that kind of either mental activity or physical activity. So think about that for a minute. Like you could say, well, I probably spend too much time, but I don't know how. Is that 5 hours a week? Is it 5 hours a day? Is it the right amount of time? And then how much time do you spend grooming your friendships? Not grooming your friendships to say, hey, I'm going to reach out to my friends because I need a job or I have an opportunity for them, but actually how much time grooming your friendship, not to get ahead or whatever, but just for enjoyment or comedy, or what do your friends give you? Like, what do you get out of your friendship that is different from your social network? Or maybe we've gotten to the point where we don't care as much about our friends. We just care about our followers. And what does that say? Okay. Oh, Michael from Toronto. Love having you here. Welcome, Michael. I'm so glad you're here. All right. Because that means all of these people here, this means good participation today, which is the best. All right. Which relationship? And be honest, this is the question you have to. So if you haven't said, I spend 3 hours a day on friendship and 5 hours a day on networks, and you could be working too, but thinking about these things, here's the question. You have to answer this question honestly. Which relationship is more important to you right now? Your network or your friendship? Meaning your social network or your friendship, like your followers, your likes, blah, 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 or your friendships. Which one is more important? And it may be interesting because maybe you think, well, right now my network is more important because I have to pay my bills and I have to cultivate my network. Or you think, you know what, always my friendships are more important. And maybe it's not reflected in the amount of time I spend, but when I really think about it, my friendships are more important. So what is more important? Oh, April, brilliant. April, brilliant, good thinker from DC, one of my favorite cities. Welcome, April. All right. So which relationship is more important to you? And fess up, friendship. So we've got April saying friendship, Parveen saying friendship. So far we've got 2 friendships. Now, would you admit, or would you say, or would you be honest in saying that the amount of time you spend grooming, and I'm using that word because we're going to get into how Dunbar looked at grooming, how much time you spend grooming your friendship, would that reflect the importance? Like, do you really spend more time grooming your friendship? Stephen says friendships. All right. So all of us say friendships. It seems like there's a right answer to that, right? Kind of like, who wants to say that we're so transactional that we care more about our likes and our follows than we do our friendships? But would our time spent, our mental and physical energy, reflect the importance of friendships? All right. We have got Ganesh from Poon, friendship. All right. So Ganesh says friendship. I love this quote by Aristotle, and I want to know if you think it's true or not. And then we're going to dive deep into Dunbar's number. Though the wish for friendship comes quickly, friendship does not. So I kind of feel that is very relatable and very true. A friend helps you move. A good friend helps you move. Michael says, okay, this is hilarious. A friend helps you move. A good friend helps you move the body, meaning that is someone you can trust, even with your deepest secrets. Oh, it's Pune, India. Okay, Ganesh says Pune, India. I thought so. I just want to make sure, but it's good to know specifically the city. All right. So Michael, a good friend, and we're going to get into trust in just a second. So, all right. So let's get into Dunbar's number and see how this can help you think. Before I do, I want to welcome Abdul Rahim from India. And Abdul says friendship. All right. So everyone, we've got 100% friendship. But my question is, would the time spent on friendship versus network reflect how you really feel? You could just be like, yes or no, yes or no. All right. First of all, rubber chickens for everyone who has answered so far, who participated. All right, zero sum. Let's talk about zero sum, because Robin Dunbar is an anthropologist and evolutionary psychologist who suggested that friendship is a zero sum system. Friendships are zero sum systems. So a zero sum, many of you know, but just as a reminder, I always like a reminder. I always need reminders because I can't remember all these things. But imagine you have a jar of marbles and it's full, it's mushed down and it's full. So you find this really cool marble that you want to put in, but the only way you can put this really cool marble into your marble collection is to take a marble out. So that is like a simple example of a zero sum system. You can't put one in without taking one out. So Robin Dunbar, this anthropologist and evolutionary psychologist, suggested that friendships are zero-sum systems. You can only have so many. And he came up with this theory while studying the grooming habits of apes. And he first proposed this number, which then later became Dunbar's number, because we love giving laws and names to things, so-and-so's law, so-and-so's number. We love that. He came up with this number in the 1990s as a cognitive limit to the number of people with whom we can maintain stable social relationships. Friends you can keep up with. And we'll differentiate between all these different kinds of friends, because social media comes on the scene and it changes our whole understanding of relationships and friendships in really profound ways. All right. So Derek also says that he values friendships over. So we have no one saying that they value their network more than their friends, but we also don't have anyone admitting that they spend as much time on their friendships as they do on their network. So maybe people do. Maybe it's like, I will be honest. I think I should spend more time on my friendships than my network than I do. Now, I think I spend a good amount of time on my friendships. My friends are very valuable to me. I love my friends, and I don't think of them entirely as transactional. But sometimes I can slip. You get into this, I've got to get so many followers, or you read about influencers, or you're like, oh my God, this post didn't get enough followers. And you're expending energy that really, it can put you out of balance. All right. So the relationships that Dunbar, and we're getting into how these kind of relationships break down. So the relationships that Dunbar is referring to, these friendships, is when you know who each person is and how they relate to every other person. So managing Dunbar's number is relationships is that you experience each of the people. So to be in Dunbar's number, and we're going to get into what it is in a second, you kind of know, you experience each person. So, I have my friend April, and I know that I think to myself, man, April, my friend April in DC would really love, let's say, Ganesh. Like April and Ganesh would really hit it off. And I know something about April. I care about April. I know something about Ganesh. I care about Ganesh, to the point where I would kind of know how they would react to each other. Like if April made pineapple upside down cake, all right, that's one of my favorite desserts, don't laugh, that Ganesh would love it, something like that. That's the level. So he found a correlation between the size of a primate's brain, specifically the neocortex, and the number of these kinds of kind of not intimate relationships, but kind of that level of relationship. And he found that the larger the cortex, the higher that number. And in humans, he found that number, when you hear Dunbar's number, it's 150 people. Now, it's not like a zero sum where one more person, you have to take one person out of your friendship circle. It's not that, this is a social science. It's not like that precise, but it seems to be at the high end. Some people, I think 150, that's a lot. But at the high end, it's between 150 and about 230. And across all kinds of time and history and businesses and tribes, that number, or that range of a number, seems to be pretty durable. All right. So this correlation between the larger brain size of primates, and specifically humans, relative to just the size of humans, seems to correlate with a higher number. A Dunbar number in this case, when you hear Dunbar's number, you think 150. And Michael says 150 seems like a lot. I completely agree. And then you think to yourself, what about all the people that I've known? Like I can remember a friend that I met when I was maybe 10 years old, and we took a trip to the beach, and I met this friend named Brenda. I can remember her clear as a bell. There wasn't Facebook, obviously, back in the day. There was no way maybe we were pen pals for a while. I don't even know. But I remember Brenda. And yet I literally cannot remember this guy I dated for maybe 2 weeks. I cannot remember his name. So that kind of memory seems to be associated with long-term memory. Obviously, mine's not that great. It is not what Dunbar's talking about when he's talking about that number. So April says, I think so too. Mine is much smaller. Mine is much smaller too. But then when he distinguishes between this Dunbar's number and these other kinds of friendship, I think it'll be curious to think if it becomes clearer for you. So according to Dunbar, this 150, and we'll get into this narrower thing that he found, which is so relatable to me and to people who say mine is much smaller. I agree that this 150 is not a choice. It's actually related to the size of our neocortex. So the theory is that the size of the cortex correlates to the size of the social group. And there's some evidence that brain structure actually can predict the number of friends one has. But when you define friends a little clearer, I'll be curious to see if you agree with Dunbar's number a little bit more or less. So he kind of explained it as, he explained it differently. I'm going to upgrade his explanation a little bit. So let's just say you're traveling to a city that is not your own city, and you happen to see someone that you knew or someone that you met at a party at a friend's house or whatever, and you see them in another city. If you saw them in your own city, you'd be like, hi, or maybe you nod to them, but you see them in this other city. So you've got this uncommon commonality of being in this other city. And maybe you say, hey, you want to grab coffee or tea or a dinner? So that kind of level of relationship, you might not get together with them if you were here in the same city, but when you see them in another city, a foreign city, you might, that kind of thing. And that's more about what he suggests. And a little bit about that. Maybe that they were an engineer, or they used to live in Hawaii, or something like that. So that's how he describes it. But it's really the number of people you know and keep up with. But it doesn't include all the people that you kind of fade away from. Like I was mentioning that person, Brenda, or the guy I dated. I can't remember his name. And even when the science studies tribes and villages, they approximate that the ancient groups usually maxed out at about 150. And when the groups got bigger, too much time was spent worrying about each other's relationships. And then they start to break out into armies and cities and nations, or even companies. And then Malcolm Gladwell takes Dunbar's number, and he's in the tipping point, and he points out that at about 150 people in a company, productivity begins to sharply decline until the company breaks into smaller groups. So departments, product groups, support functions, etc. So I don't know how many of you have ever worked in a small company, and then, as it's growing and growing and growing, and you think to yourself, man, I used to know everyone here. Who is that person? What happened to Martha? How many of you have worked in a small company as it has grown and you've experienced this kind of decline in connectedness? Anyone? Anyone has been with either an entrepreneur or started with a company, early, one of the early employees? Anyone at all? All right, that's the question. So then Dunbar writes this piece, I think it's like in 2018 in the Financial Times. And the piece is called "Why Drink is the Secret to Humanity's Success." So he talks about Dunbar's number as like, you meet someone in a bar and you meet someone and you say, hey, you want to get a drink, that kind of thing. So I think that's the twist of how he was writing. All right. So he finds that he does this research, he looks deeper, and remember, he's looking at the grooming habits. How many people do we pick ticks out of their hair or their fur? So he looks deeper, and he finds that we have an inner core of about 5 people to whom we devote 40% of our available social time. 5 people. So that may make, then you kind of go, okay, well, that's more what I was anchoring to when I got to 150. I thought, what am I, a loser? I don't have any friends. That was my thought when I first learned about Dunbar's number. And you look deeper and you realize, aha, it's referring to something slightly different. All right. And that there are about 10 more people for a total of 15 people to whom we devote 20%. So that suggests that we devote about 2/3 of our social time to just 15 people. All right. So now that you know that, now, which does not take away from Dunbar's number of 150, then you start thinking, does that make you, do you relate more to the 5 to 15 or more to the 150? All right. So Stephen says he's been through the growth decline in connectiveness cycles multiple times. So in other words, he's been in a company. I'm speculating, and I know a little bit because I know him because he's my husband. But he's been in companies where, you start very small and you feel very connected, and then it grows, and then you look across the hall and you're like, I don't even, where's Martha? I don't even know these people. And then April says it's like you only have so much energy to spend time with. And that is really true. And that's really true. And it's not about what you want to do. It's really about, according to Dunbar and other researchers, the limits of our brain, like the physiological limits of our brain. So you can say, I want to spend more time with my friends, but I want more friends. Now, social media comes on and it steals some of that time. It steals from some of the time that we could be devoting, because we have a limit, it's zero sum, that we could be devoting to our friendship. So if you had to count, all right, if you actually had to count, and this gets back to Michael's comment about, like, you can trust someone to help you bury the body, whatever, right? If you really had to count, how many people do you trust? I mean, you might not be able to do that really quickly, but just and you could change your mind later, but just if you had to count, just kind of a quick count, blah, 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 how many people would you trust? That would not be 150 people. That's not what Dunbar's talking about. Most people would be lucky to have 5 people. Most people. So Michael says the difference is actually between friendship and acquaintances. Yeah, really it is. They call it Dunbar's number, but there is a distinction also between acquaintances that you once knew and acquaintances with whom you completely keep in contact with. Maybe you're grooming those friendships at least once a year. If you're only grooming those friendships when you need to reach out to them for a transactional experience, like, oh, I wonder if they're hiring at, Adidas. I'm going to reach out to my friend who worked there. I haven't talked to her for 5 years, but that's different. But that could be in your 150 connections if you maybe had groomed them once a year, but maybe you're not inviting them to your most intimate parties, etc. So April says, let's see, she says 5, don't make that 3. Okay, no, I think 3 is I think if you have 3 people that you can totally trust, that makes you probably pretty lucky. Now, question, how many people outside of your family do you feel you can totally trust? And I'll tell you why. Because it turns out that family is different. Because there is another point of connection that can't be severed. I mean, you could say, you're not my family anymore, I disown you. But really, your family is your family. You're stuck with them, or you're lucky to have them. I feel that way mostly in my case. I'm lucky to have them. So, my best friends are my family. The people I feel I can trust the most are my family. But I have a few people outside of the family that I feel are my dear, trusted friends. So how many people outside of your family, when you think of the people you can trust, and I'm going to give April bonus points because she's the only one that came clean with the number of people she can trust. That's a hard thing to admit necessarily, or even to think about. So Parveen Parveen says 4 people. Okay. Chickens, rubber chickens. And that, you really think about that. How much time do you spend cultivating the people you can trust? How much time do you spend cultivating your inner circle? Maybe you don't even have an inner circle. Maybe outside of your family, you think to yourself, I've really got to cultivate some friendships. Maybe you need to borrow a little bit of time away from, Facebook or LinkedIn and devote that time to cultivating some friendships. Just maybe you say, okay, I'm going to spend X amount of time and I'm going to pick these people and I'm going to think about Aristotle and the fact that it takes longer to make friends than to think about making friends, and I'm going to devote that time. Researchers found something interesting about Americans. So researchers estimated that most Americans know just 10 to 25 people well enough to say they trust them. And I thought to myself, that's a lot of people. Now, there's levels of trust, right? Like, I trust that I could call this friend and come help me if my car was stuck in the snow, or I trust that I could tell a friend this secret and they wouldn't tell people. Anyway, so that researchers found that Americans know just 10 to 25 people. And they say just, I think, wow, that's a lot of people who say that they could trust that many people. I don't know, from the people who have shared how many people they could trust, does this sound right to you? I don't know, it seems high to me. He also found that, Dunbar also found that people with over 1,000 Facebook friends still only track and communicate with 150 people. And most communication is with your same 20 people on Facebook. Now, obviously, Facebook controls that algorithm. So all of a sudden, you're seeing posts from someone that might not be and then eventually you kind of think that they are your friends because you start seeing them. So Facebook can manipulate the people that we hold as our core, or even Facebook can determine who's in our Dunbars number. And that's important to recognize too, because if it is zero sum, if it truly is one marble in, one marble out, one friend in, one friend out, and you let the algorithms determine that, then you're giving up a lot of control over who you have as a friend and who you have as a network. Does social media change how you think about relationships and friendships? Like, for example, is it the same for LinkedIn? Because LinkedIn is all about your network, but Facebook is supposed to be about your friendship. And I mean, I'll admit on Facebook, I use Facebook a lot for monitoring different kinds of groups that are talking about different kinds of medical things, because I think it's interesting to see how in the United States, how the medical field can't interact with some Facebook groups. So there's some Facebook groups that are talking about some treatments that are not FDA approved, and the doctors can't participate because they're not allowed to use these treatment modalities, but maybe if you're a naturopath, you can, but if you're an MD, you can't. So anyway, crazy, but so I go in to kind of see what people are talking about. But I find that the more I go in there, the less I see from my network. So I no longer have my Dunbars number of 150 people where I know who's getting married and who's getting divorced and who's gotten some diagnosis. And I kind of miss that. Stephen says, being able to override Facebook's news feed algorithms is probably Facebook's most desired new feature. Absolutely. And then, maybe it's just enough control where you think you're overriding it, but you're not. I think it's important to think about Dunbar's number, because you might say, hey, even on LinkedIn or some of these other social media, I want to make sure that if 150 or 230 is my zero sum, these are the people that I want to know better, but they're not going to be like my besties that I trust with everything. But I'm going to give as much as I get from these people. I'm not just going to go to them when I lose my job and I need to, start, oh my gosh, I better build my network. It's actually filling the social capital bucket before you need it, but also not just from a transactional point, but like from a fun point, like being on the show and enjoying each other's company and enjoying each other's good thinking. All right. When you think of how many people, all the people that you've ever met, what number comes to mind? Would it be like, okay, in my whole life, how many people have I met? I don't even know. Thousands of people? Would it be 10? I don't even know if it'd be 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000. I have no idea. All I get, Jennifer says, hey, welcome, Jennifer. All I get from Facebook and Instagram are ads. Yeah, exactly. All you get are ads. But then, and April's like, exactly. And Michael says, a good relationship has to be face-to-face. And you can't have a truly trustworthy social media friendship. I would put them as acquaintance. Actually, what Michael says is really true. I have to give him rubber chickens on this one, because there's so much evidence about eyeballs to eyeballs. What will be interesting is whether over video, because certainly over video is more than over phone, and face-to-face, there is probably some kind of, energy transfer, not to be woo-woo, but actually at a quantum level, probably some energy transfer that cultivates these friendships. So Michael says thousands. And, I think probably thousands. Like, how many people have you known in your entire life? I probably think thousands, but I have no way of really knowing if that is true. If you were any other primate but human, your social relationships would be cultivated and maintained by picking bugs out of your friend's fur. So to Michael's point, April's point, Jennifer's point, like, your friendships are really going to be cultivated face-to-face. And so you need to think about the time and energy that we spend on our networks, which, are important for business, whatever, and also for fun, and our true friendships, the people that we can trust and the people that we have fun with, or maybe they're for comedy or for adventure or whatever. We have different friends for different things. So I don't really know why friendship seems to get relegated to the bottom of our relationship efforts, but it seems that it is more relegated to the bottom of our relationship efforts than it was before we had social media, where we are able to connect with people like my friend Brenda when I was 10 years old. Like if we had had Facebook back then, maybe we would be friends now. But and like many of my friends in college, I have completely lost touch with. And, there was no Facebook. So que sera, off you go. But also, when I graduated from college, I wasn't worried about, is my job good enough? What did other people get? Are they earning more? Do they have a cooler job? None of that was even a concern. I just, looked for a job, did my life. I didn't think about every adventure and how it would look on, how it would look on the phone. It's a completely different thing. Picking bugs. So think about your friendship as picking bugs. You've got to be close enough to pick the bugs out of their hair. And April says, because you think they will be there. Right. You think they will be there. And then when you hear that something happens, which it does, you think, why didn't I? Why didn't I cultivate that friendship? Well, get on it with the people that you know now. So if you think about the people that if you only can connect, if you can only really have in Dunbar's number, and I'm not talking about that intimate group of friends, but if you can only really have, if what Dunbar says is true, 150 is what you're talking about when you hear Dunbar's number, but 150 to 230, if you can only have 150 people in your Dunbar's number, in your bag of marbles, and it's truly a zero sum, maybe it would be interesting to think about how thoughtful you are, or to how purposeful you are about what marbles you put in that jar, like what friendships you put into that number. And if you could connect with 150 people on social media, that might be a much different number or different group than if you thought, okay, I can only have 150 friends on Facebook, not 5,000, 150. And so I'm not competing. These are my 150. Who would I have? So what's your optimal relationship to transactional ratio? The time you spend on your relationships, your friendships, versus the time you spend on your transactional relationships. What's that right ratio? Well, if you say your friendships are more important, then that should inform your decision. All right, so I just like to think about it. It's not like, okay, this is what you should do, but I like knowing about Dunbar's number, even if it seems a little high, when you start thinking about it in terms of like the maximum number of people you could keep up with in a year, that you could know enough about to remember that they might like this person, that kind of level of relationship. Maybe you want to be purposeful about who's in your jar of marbles. And my favorite to end, one of my favorites, Aristotle, critical thinking, is no one would choose to live without friends, even if he had all the other goods. That's what I'll leave you with. Have a great week, good thinkers. Tune in next week. Actually, I'm hoping to be, we'll go streaming live from Santa Fe, New Mexico. I've never been, but I'm going to visit a friend there. So we're going to try to stream live from Santa Fe. We'll see you next Monday, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time on LinkedIn Live. And if you subscribe and hit that bell on YouTube, Becky Saltzman, you can join us on YouTube from wherever. Okay, so we've got a couple of final comments that I want to pull in. Michael says, unfortunately, you will come across toxic marbles that need to get changed out. Yes, absolutely. So that's, even if they're not toxic, it's a zero sum. So even if you had 150 beautiful marbles, you might have to take one out to put one in. And April, reassess, okay, love it. Reassess friendships like a stock portfolio. Okay, I'm going to upgrade that. We're going to end on April's comment. Reassess friendships like a stock portfolio, especially Dunbar's number. Your acquaintance is fine, but only so many friends, so many marbles in the jar. Thanks. Have a great week.